Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, and thank you for joining us. There's a lot of stuff out there, and you do not need to spend an hour a week with me and my guest, but you do, and that's incredible. I've been noticing a lot higher downloads on these recent episodes, and that's incredible. I just can't thank you enough for that. So no matter where you joined up this weird journey, thank you for doing so, and thank you for continuing to show interest in this. Even though it's free and technically you don't need to do anything besides press a few buttons, I really do appreciate it because obviously it shows some sort of, commitment to this idea and this discussion and ultimately independent music. So, boom, there you go. The guest this week, Matt Miner. He is a comic book writer and the creator of Liberator, which is an awesome title, which we will talk about a little bit later. And comics, they're incredible. I've been on such a renaissance recently with comic books ever since I discovered that libraries stock them. And that way I'm able to keep my interest up, but save my pocketbook from really depleting all of my funds by buying so many comics. My focus is on vinyl. I spend a ton of money on vinyl, so I can't maintain like 7 different collections of all these things I'm interested in. Anyways, I digress. We'll talk more about Matt Miner in a second. PropertyofZach.com. They cover all of the latest, greatest, awesomest, sweetest news, reviews, whatever you want with independent music, check there. They will have you covered. You will walk away from visiting that site being like, yo, that's really cool. I didn't know that. I didn't know that record label had all these awesome people working for them. Yeah, it just kind of really does resonate with me because it's kind of what this show tries to do as well, where it's just documenting this scene, these people that are the creators behind what it is that, is getting put out to the world for people to enjoy. So visit their website, propertyofzach.com. And 2 other bits of business. Go to the iTunes store, drop a review. We're like 130 some odd reviews, and that's incredible. And I really love to see people leaving reviews being like, hey, I don't even listen to podcasts, and this is incredible. Because that just gives me hope, not only for podcasting as a medium, but also the fact that people can kind of join in wherever they find this show through whatever band or whatever guest I have on, and then start to, cherry pick the previous episodes. It's awesome. So do that, and I really do pay attention to what you are leaving. And also, visit the website, 100wordspodcast.com. You'll be able to find a bunch of stuff I post there during the week, and join in the conversation. It's a Tumblr page, so for those of you that tumble, you can interact with it that way. And people send me random questions on there as well. Usually, sometimes they're mean, but it's okay. I got thick skin. Anyways, those are the things. We have a mailbag question this week from a person named Ian from Winnipeg. He's 18 years old, and he had a pretty large question, and I'm going to try to answer this succinctly, but for those of you that listen to the show and know me as an individual, know that I don't necessarily condense myself very well. But basically, his gist is that he is ending college soon, and he wants to play in a band. He's had bands kind of, start and fizzle out, and he said, do you think you could give me some advice on being in bands? And kind of 2 parts to that. Actually, I could do like a 7-hour podcast on that, but 2 parts that jump out immediately. For one, it's obviously about who you surround yourself with. For me, I couldn't write music, and I had to look for people who were able to do that. And fortunately, I had a few people, namely 2 people at the school that I went to, who were interested in the same style of music and said, hey, let's try to put something together. Honestly, it was my idea, just as far as like, you always need that 1 person or 2 people in the band to be like, yeah, let's do this. Like, they're the ones that are motivated. They're the ones that are booking the practice space or figuring out those, details and logistics and stuff, which will lead to my second point. But yeah, just kind of surround yourself with people. Obviously, there are many different avenues in which you can meet people that share similar interests in music, whether that's, Facebook, any social networking platform. And then on top of that, finding your local independent-ish record store or comic book store, like people that are into sort of, the fringe art, as it were, because that way you'll be able to meet some people that you may not have met online or whatever the case may be. So view your strengths at whatever you're good at, whether it's like, you're a shredder guitar or, you're solid at the drums. Just try to find those people who are like, yeah, I want to try to create music. And don't be so focused on the fact that like, I want to sound like these 3 bands. And if people aren't interested in joining with those jiving with those 3 particular bands, then I'm not interested in playing with them. So many visions have been completely thrown off based on that fact. And it's like, when you start playing with people, it's just about growing and figuring out ultimately where you want to end up as far as your musical vision is concerned. And I think, the more you play with a person, the more in sync you'll be, and then be like, okay, we're going to go there. I never thought I would go there musically, but that's where it's at. So that's one point. Second point, he asked me in particular in regards to like being sort of the business guy of the band. And honestly, if you enjoy like organizing things and like, making schedules and figuring out logistics, like if you're the guy that's in your group of friends, guy or girl, I'm not sexist here, if you were the person that is organizing, birthday plans, or hey, let's meet up here on Saturday at 8 and like let's do this, you are perfect for being that guy in the band that's like booking shows, that's trying to talk to record labels, that sort of stuff. Just because there needs to be one sort of logistical manager, and also you have to be ready to fail, and you have to be willing to learn from your mistakes. Because a lot of times the first taste of failure, you're just crushed. And like I can so distinctly remember 2 instances. One, dragging my bandmates out to a show that we got confirmed in Texas, doing like a 20 some odd hour drive. The show was like, all right, we'll guarantee you $4,000 to play. I thought that was ridiculous, but of course we said yes. So we ended up getting paid, I think about $400. And I learned from my mistakes. It's like, okay, sometimes these promises aren't what they're made to be. And then the second one of just like being crushed, absolutely crushed by failure, is the first time I tried to book a U.S. tour. And I think I had about, like 3 weeks worth of dates booked. And then maybe about a week or so before, they just all fell apart. And so I didn't let that completely kill me. I apologized to my bandmates. I apologized to the band that we were supposed to be on tour with. But it was my first try. And I kind of got up and started again and, just learned from that. That's ultimately the biggest thing. So if you enjoy doing that, and also not getting thanked, like don't expect, your bandmates to be like, oh, dude, thank you so much for booking that show. It's just something you do. You kind of have to shoulder that burden and be like, okay, I'm going to try to do this to the best of my ability. And hopefully my bandmates, don't get mad at me for, trying something different or, learning from your mistakes. So hopefully that provides you some guidance, Ian. Not like I am some guru on top of a mountain dispensing wisdom, but I'm just speaking from my experience and kind of the pointers that I've learned over time. So that's for Ian and anybody else that's like trying to play in a band and trying to put something together. Those are the little things that you can take away. Let's talk to Matt Miner. He is an awesome dude. This comic that he created called Liberator basically focuses on everyday heroes. These are people that are actually, not Batman, not Superman. These are people who are part of the animal liberation movement, and they are breaking into laboratories. They're breaking into mink farms. They're breaking into these places where animals are imprisoned and releasing them. And whether or not you agree with any sort of animal rights movement, any animal liberation movement, that doesn't matter. What matters is the story. I think it's an incredible way that he portrays these people as just, everyday people like you and myself, being able to, kind of take matters into their own hands. And, some could argue, like, obviously a vigilante style. Neither I myself am not endorsing a violent lifestyle because I personally don't adhere to that. But just that idea of like you can make the difference yourself, whether you think you can or not. You can take these actions and you can learn from them. So I thought it was a very empowering story. I've only read 2 of the 4 issues, but they're both incredible. And so, I just thought Matt would be a very compelling interview, and it turns out he is. Yeah, for those of you who are interested in starting comic books, like this interview is perfect because you'll hear kind of his story and kind of how he started to put the pieces together. And this is a crowd-funded comic, so let's talk to Matt Miner.
Broadcast about my racist grandmother.
Yeah. I did not record that, though, so we're good.
Oh, okay.
But my first exposure to your work and just kind of, who you are was via another podcast by the Dudes in Propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you listened to that podcast, that Escape Velocity Radio. Yeah, they just basically, when you launched your Kickstarter campaign, they spoke about it, and it was one of those things I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, something like this exists? And then I looked at your page and was, pleasantly surprised that, wow, like, the Kickstarter is doing very, very well. And you seem to be, on the route of getting funded. And so I, ponied up some cash and contributed, was just very taken by the subject matter that you were putting across is obviously, it comes from a good place. You're very passionate about it. But then on the flip side, this is also meant to be entertainment as well. Once you kind of directly compared it yourself to like, yo, if you like The Punisher, you're probably going to like this. Mm-hmm. And so it just kind of blew my mind that this all like, existed in the world. And I mean, obviously it shows the beauty of the internet and everybody can kind of have their own little thing going on. But yours obviously is much larger than just a little thing. How has the response been? I mean, I know it's kind of a cliched question, but has it kind of blown you away that the amount of people that have poked their head up from so many different circles and been like, yo, Liberator's awesome?
Yeah. I mean, it really, really surprised me, like how positive the response has been. I expected kind of like, the hardcore punk music scenes and the vegan and animal rights scenes to be behind Liberator. What I didn't expect was all the professional comic creators and fans and people who maybe aren't involved in this subculture of animal rights activism. Mm-hmm. And they've stepped forward and they're like, this is actually pretty fucking awesome. So that has been what I've been really stoked about, because that's really what we wanted to do, was to present this material in a way that regular, quote unquote, regular people, kind of could read it and enjoy it and maybe get something out of it.
I love that idea, because that's like basically what every, show that you go to exists in that world, where it's like, all right, whatever we experience here in this, 200 person venue is incredible, but we need to take it out to the, quote unquote streets. And that doesn't necessarily need to mean the streets, but, you apply these principles to your daily life. And to have something such as this, where it's like, okay, this is something that is rooted in passion and politics, but that can also translate to people who are, by all definition of the term, just, kind of normal people.
Right.
Not these weird kids in the corner that, will hang out by themselves.
Right, exactly. And, that was the most important part of this project, was that, the regular everyday comic reader who already kind of, idolizes, or not idolizes, but, looks up to these masked heroes.
Yeah.
Because I'm a comic reader from when I was a little kid. And, I get the whole, I love Batman type thing. And so the most important thing to me was to write this in a way that was entertaining and, existed within this world of direct action, animal rights, animal liberation stuff. But tailored in a way that, these people who already dig masked vigilantes would also enjoy. So yeah.
Well, that's a really tough line to toe, because it's like you don't want to be so insular to where you're alienating, where people, the actual issue doesn't speak to them, but they may pick a few things that they identify with. So that's hard.
Oh, it's extremely hard. I mean, you're walking this line of, if I say this, is it going to be preachy? But you also don't want to water down the subject. You don't want to candy coat it. You don't want to gloss over things. You don't want to sugarcoat it. Yeah. So I didn't do that either. So it's just kind of this narrow line. And a couple people have thought it was preachy, but for the most part, all the reviews that have been coming in have said the opposite, that they thought it might be preachy, but it wasn't. So yeah, it's good.
That's cool. To back things up, the obvious place to start beyond just the, I had to give the Liberator plug and sort of the congratulations to, you for launching this initially. You were originally from California, or were you born and raised? Yeah, you were by every definition of the term a military brat.
Yeah, pretty much, minus the brat part.
Right. What did your father do in the military?
He was a Russian linguist. So what he was doing for a lot of his time was teaching Russian to other people. But during the time that we weren't getting along with Russia, and things were still a little sketchy,
sure,
like in the 80s, he was basically listening to Russian radio transmissions and translating them for the military.
Yeah, and decoding them.
Yeah, just translating them.
Yeah. That's true. He didn't need a decoder ring. He needed his Russian knowledge.
Correct.
What was your family structure like? Was your mom present? Did you have brothers and sisters?
No brothers and sisters. My dad, he was largely not present just because he was in the military. Like when we lived in California, I did most of my growing up there, and he was stationed elsewhere. Like he was stationed in Monterey, and we were up near Yosemite, and then he was stationed in like Augsburg, and so I didn't really see him a lot growing up. And then they got divorced when I was about 10. So that was my family structure. My mom was going to school full time and also working full time to support us.
Got it. What does your mom do for a living?
Well, she's retired now, but she was a nurse practitioner, and she worked in a mental hospital for many years.
Oh wow, that's a challenging field.
It's an intense job. I don't know how she did it. She's incredibly strong. So yeah, it's something that I don't know that I could do.
Yeah. It's always interesting when you encounter people, especially within your family, that take on these, what a lot of people would define as monumental tasks or jobs. And you're just like, yeah, that seemed normal to them, but like, holy crap, that's incredible.
Yeah. And when you're a little kid, you don't understand how much work goes into this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
She wasn't a nurse practitioner when I knew her, but she was working 60 hours a week and going to school full time. It's just, I don't know how she did it.
Yeah, totally. And then obviously to spend time with you and raise you and obviously lead you in some right paths.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I'm an only child as well. So I definitely identify with that experience. And did you enjoy that experience, or were you like, man, I want a brother or sister?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a little kid, yeah, sure. I wanted a brother or sister, but I grew kind of bitter and closed off in my teenage years, and I didn't want to talk to anybody, so I didn't care.
Right. Yeah, you're like, this is better that I don't have anybody else bugging me.
Yeah, for sure. So,
and so where in California did you spend, like you said, your formative years?
Do you know where Yosemite National Park is? It's kind of Northern California.
Yeah.
It's so I grew up right outside of there in this tiny little town. A very rural area, very racist little homophobic town. No, I say that in all seriousness.
Yeah. You're like, I'm not being glib.
It was an awful backwards little town. There are some good people, if anyone's listening from my high school, I'm not saying everybody was awful, but a whole lot of people were awful. So
right. Well, I'm sure being forced to move every so often, I'm sure there's good and bad from the perspective of, obviously, it gave you a much different view of the world because you got to experience all these different cultures and people. But then you are landlocked a lot of these times where it's like you are in this small town that's like, I got no way out of this right now.
Yeah, I mean, after my parents divorced, I wasn't moving around anymore until I graduated high school. So from age 10 to 18 or 8 to 18 or something like that, I was in that town, but before then, like when I was in Germany and whatever, I mean, that was an incredible experience. My best friend was this Turkish kid. We actually did the thing where you cut your hands and become blood brothers.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Remember when that was a normal thing to do?
I never actually went through it, but I remember because I was I still am extremely close to my mom, and I remember telling her about that, and she was like, "That is an awful idea. There's this thing called cleanliness and bodily diseases." I was like, "Oh shit, you're right." Like, okay.
Yeah. I didn't ask her permission. We just did it. I was a little kid.
Yeah, you're smart. I was just. I was a total nerd and had to do that. Like, hey, Mom, I need your permission to be a blood brother.
Right.
But yeah, wow. So that's good. You did that in Germany.
From age 8 to 18, I was kind of in this tiny little town. I mean, we didn't even have cable TV. It was very, very insulated from the outside world, and I wanted to get out really bad. And, I was bullied as a kid. I was picked on a lot because, I was the only kid in school with purple hair and piercings. And, this is back in the late 80s, so, I mean, it was tough for a while there.
Sure.
And then, I graduated in early 90s and moved to Portland, and, things changed completely.
Sure.
I got to Portland and there were people who didn't call me a fag every day. It was cool.
Right. Yeah. As cliched as the saying is of it gets better, it does, because you start to be able to choose to surround yourself with people who you can identify with, as opposed to being stuffed in a room that you had to figure out how to survive.
Yeah, exactly.
Comics came into your life, like you mentioned, as a little kid, and then how did that kind of coincide with your musical upbringing?
Well, comics when I was a little kid. I mean, when I was a little kid, we still had comics in grocery stores. So, we'd go grocery shopping and there'd be the spinner racks of comic books. And, I'd bug my mom, please get me, over and over and over. And as far as music goes, I mean, I was really insulated. So, like in high school, I was into, like Ramones and Sex Pistols and stuff like that. And then it wasn't until getting out of high school that I, really started to branch out and discover there was more than the big names of punk rock. But in high school, I definitely found, kind of this music really resonated with me just because I was a nerd who was picked on, and these people making this music were also nerds who were picked on. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Since you were in such an insular community, how did it kind of even get introduced to you? Because obviously this was pre-internet.
Yeah, I mean, it was pre-internet. We didn't have cable TV growing up. We were in an area of town that wasn't even offered to us.
Right.
So, it was introduced to me through friends who had moved from larger cities. Like I remember one friend who came from San Bernardino, and he's who introduced me to like the Germs and Dead Kennedys and stuff like that. You pick stuff up from kids who come from bigger cities, but then you don't know anything outside of those bands.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you're not going to shows, because there aren't any shows, for hours.
No, yeah,
in any direction.
Right.
So it's not like you're hearing about, you're not seeing this opening band and then picking up their CD because you never went to the show,
Because everyone always talks about like having to put in work in order to, find out about these bands and do this sort of research and whatever, pre-internet days like we were talking about. But when you're not given the ability to do any of that work, because you can't go to a record store. Like, right. What are you can't find a zine, because it's not like a kid down the street is doing a zine on punk and hardcore.
No.
So yeah, you were left to your own devices and kind of piecing it together.
Yeah, pretty much. Kind of identify with this music, and then once I got to Portland, it was all over. I was at shows as much as I could be, and
right.
It was like a whole new world opened up to me, musically and with everything else,
And so as you were kind of transitioning out of high school, I presume your high school experience, because you were picked on, like, did you care about your studies at all? Or is it like, yo, I just need to get out of here alive?
I actually did care about my studies. I mean, I was in some AP classes my senior year of high school. I did pretty well. Math was not my thing. So my senior year of high school, I was in, AP English, and I was in all these creative writing classes. And then I was in like remedial math, just so I could pass high school, because I had failed Algebra 1 3 years. So at that time in California, it was a requirement. I don't know what it is now, but you had to have 2 years of math to pass high school. And I had failed Algebra 1 3 times, and, passed it on, or I failed it twice, passed it on the third time, barely. And they told me, you can go into geometry and risk it, or you can take this remedial math class so you can at least graduate high school. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, and you're like, sign me up immediately.
Yeah, right?
It's so funny because I find so many people that have, I mean, it seems like you have a somewhat of a strong English background. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because you can totally draw that line in the sand where it's like, okay, you're good at English, you're going to suck at math. Like, that's just a reality.
Yes, yeah, so some people are just that way, I mean, yeah. I still don't know my times tables because I can't remember them. I swear I'm like dyslexic with numbers.
That's funny. 9 times 9, couldn't tell you that. Well, at least you passed. What was your sort of like quote unquote career path? What were you like? All right, I want to sink my teeth into this.
In high school, I really wanted to be a writer, and so I wrote and submitted for years. After years of rejection, past high school too, I kind of finally gave that up. And I don't know, I kind of got into drugs and alcohol, and that kind of wrecks your motivation to do anything with your life sometimes. So
what were you attempting to, what were you submitting? Were you doing like works of fiction, nonfiction? What were you trying to accomplish from that perspective?
I was doing fiction, prose, and I was submitting wherever I could. I mean, this is before the internet, so I had, the big thick writer's guide book that kind of collects up everywhere that you can submit to. And, I was sending off submissions left and right. And after years and years of rejections, I just like, this isn't for me. I can't do this anymore. That's the wrong message to give, because I wish I would have kept on, because now that I am writing and I am being published, I'm like, fuck, I wish I would have just kept on and, not gotten involved with drugs and not gotten involved with alcohol and, just kind of kept on doing this thing.
It's also hard, like removing the, drugs and alcohol aspect of, obviously, like you said, how it kind of kills your motivation. But I mean, it's hard because obviously, especially when you're in your early 20s, you have no fucking clue what you're doing. So you're trying to, find your voice, and you don't know, like you said, you're just scattershot submitting everywhere. To receive those rejections, you're like, you were probably submitting to places that had, you had no business in submitting to. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. So it's definitely hard, where it's like, I don't think the message necessarily is wrong, but it's just like, well, it'll, sometimes it takes you years to find that voice. And like, obviously, it can be a testament to what you're doing now, where it's like, yeah, it just, it took me a while.
And, the stupid thing is, I mean, this is the early 90s we're talking about now, and comics were in this like boom. I mean, it was the speculator boom, and I was reading tons of comics, and it never, not once occurred to me, why don't I try and write comics? I mean, I'm trying to write all this other shit, and comics never occurred to me. I have no idea.
It's something that's so funny and obvious, like in hindsight. But I mean, I see this, like my wife is a high school English teacher, and I see a lot of her kids, like, whatever, they have an idea of what they want to do with their lives. And it's just like taking that idea and maybe distilling it down to a smaller version and trying to figure out a way to make money off that smaller version. And sometimes you just don't see it because it's right in front of you, and you're just like, oh, there's no way. Like, dude, Stan Lee, how could I ever become that?
Right. Right. You don't have to be Stan Lee.
Right. It's such an insurmountable goal. And it's like, you just got to break it down. And sometimes, the most obvious things are right in front of you. And you just didn't see it. Yeah. What pulled you up to Portland?
Well, I went there because for a few reasons. It was close,
Sure.
from Northern California. My cousin was there, and he had a job that he was offering me.
Oh, okay.
Tech work, computer repair. And I wanted to go to school up there. That was short-lived. I had these reasons to go up there. Plus, I mean, I know it sounds really stupid, but I spent all these years kind of being picked on in this tiny little redneck town, and the grunge scene was exploding, and the punk scene was still around, more so. And I was like, why don't I go somewhere that's fucking cooler than this town?
Yeah.
And go to Portland. And I was a lot happier there, so I think I made the right choice. I mean, I love that town. I consider that my hometown over my real hometown. I mean, I moved around so much that I don't have a real hometown, so I consider Portland my hometown.
Right. Well, yeah, you can define that as your home. Like you may have spent time elsewhere, but it's like that's probably the first place you felt comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're, obviously because you are an unapologetic, animal rights activist. When did that kind of become part of your life? Was that in like high school as well, or did that happen later on?
Oh yeah, that happened much later on. I mean, I was a big meat eater, and I always considered myself an animal lover because I loved my cats and stuff. But but I didn't really make the connection until about 10 years ago.
Okay.
There was a night that I literally Googled animal cruelty videos because I wanted to figure out what made vegans. I knew some vegans, and I was like, what is it about this that's that's so terrible?
Right.
I was like, I wanted to see if it was really as bad as,
right. Yeah. You're like, how bad could it be? Come on,
how bad
guys.
could it be? Exactly. So, and I stuck with it. And I a lot of people are like, oh, I could never watch that. And then they continue eating meat and wearing leather and all that.
Right.
Because they don't want to see the reality. But I stuck with it that night, and I watched video after video. By the end of the night, I decided I was going pescatarian. And after a week, I saw how ridiculously easy that was, so I went vegan immediately. So within 7 days of me Googling animal cruelty videos, I was vegan, and I haven't changed yet. So,
well, it's cool. I always like how everybody that is into veganism, animal rights in general, like they always have that one singular story where it's like, yeah, here was the moment where shit changed.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so definitive. And almost everybody that I've ever spoken to about this, like has that moment of like, oh yeah, like some people can even pinpoint the date. They're like, yeah, on December 27th, 1997. I'm like, that's just, it's awesome that obviously it resonates with people that much,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big epiphany when you've been taught your whole life that, it's just the natural order of things that, we eat meat and we drink milk and this is what we do and it's okay. And, animals have to die to feed us because otherwise what would we do? Eat sticks and grass. And, you're told all this crap. And you're fed this line of bullshit that, vegetarian guys and vegan guys are a bunch of weak pussies and this, that, and you know what I mean? I mean, you're fed all this propaganda. And so, you just come to accept this as true. And so when you actually decide to take a look, behind the curtain, I mean, it's a pretty big wow moment,
Sure.
So of course people are going to remember that because it rocked my world that night. I mean, I started crying. I was watching these videos. I was bawling at my computer. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Well, I think it's really cool for you too, because typically a lot of people have that experience that you're speaking about when they're in high school or when they're younger, because obviously your synapses are so open to any decisions that you can make on your own. Because a lot of times, like when you make a decision to put some label on yourself, whether it's veganism, straight edge, whatever, like any label that you can feel like you can put on yourself, and you have that level of like, I can control this in my life, I am making this decision, and that's like the first decision you could make because you're in high school, and normally that's never afforded to you. And so it's cool that you had that experience later on in life, because usually the stereotypical response of people, even over the age of like 25, they're like, oh dude, I'm set in my ways, like I'm good.
Yeah, right.
It's like, really? Like, no, you can still learn, that?
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, I'm always what I claimed Edge 3 years ago. I mean, I claimed Edge at 35.
That's so good.
I finally, got my life straightened up, and I was still smoking cigarettes, and I was like, I got a little sick, and I was like, fuck this, I don't want to poison myself anymore. I don't want to live this way. So yeah, I mean, it was like one of the best things I ever did for myself.
I think something that you could maybe your motto can be just like, hey, better late than never. Like, so like, I may not have started writing comic books when I was like 20, but I'm doing it now. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm a late bloomer or something. I don't know.
To me, I think that's more compelling. You've gone down certain paths for so long. It's hard to change these things that have been wired in you for years. And I like that. I like that you've arrived here at a later stage in life, quote unquote.
Well, I mean, I'm always learning. Now I'm learning more about feminism. And it's like, if I can help in a small way, like with this comic book, in portraying a strong female lead who isn't objectified or drawn all sexy, and women can not be offended reading, then why wouldn't I do that? So I'm always trying to kind of learn and better myself, in this way.
Yeah, I think that's a great philosophy to have. Was it primarily drugs or alcohol? Was it both that you were battling with?
No, it was both. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually they come hand in hand.
Yeah. That was a big mess.
Yeah, so I find that interesting because, I mean, obviously you can say this now because, you can reflect on it, but a lot of people don't really mention the fact that kills your motivation. Usually it's just like, oh yeah, I'm fucked up with friends or whatever, and like the whole party atmosphere. And it's like a lot of people don't really take the time to reflect on the fact that, oh yeah, like this just puts you in a pit of despair and you can't really get out of it, and it kills your motivation. That's like, was that kind of what the circle that you were in, or was it just like?
Well, I think it's more of something I'm realizing after the fact.
Sure.
When I'm looking back and I'm going, well, why didn't I do this with my life? Why didn't I do that? And it's like, well, I was fucked up. I was drunk. I was hungover all the time. Who's gonna do this when they're high on crystal meth? That kind of thing. I think it's something that I'm realizing later. Now that I'm sober, I'm like, man, if I hadn't been drunk those years straight, maybe I could have gotten something done with my life. At the same time, if I hadn't had those experiences, I might not be the same person I am now.
It's a total catch-22 because it's like you look at especially negative experiences. Obviously, we as humans have a tendency to shut those down. Like we don't remember them as easily as we remember, this amazing sunset that I saw on this day or whatever. We just forget about bad shit because, we can carry it around, but in order for us to continually move forward, we try not to think about that stuff because it's crippling.
Right.
So I can get where you can be reflective on that now because obviously you're in a better place. With that, like what pulled you out of that to begin with, because obviously, like you said, you didn't, wake up one morning and say like, oh, here, I'm going to be straight edge.
Right.
What,
unlike going vegan, the journey to me, being straight edge was long. I had a problem with crystal meth for a lot of years. And, what got me off that was basically moving somewhere where I didn't have it available to me. And I decided that was okay. I wasn't going to go looking for it. I didn't want to be addicted to this drug. That got me off of that. But then I picked up alcohol and then I picked up an addiction to prescription drugs. So those were my three big ones. The alcohol was the hardest to get off of. And the prescription drugs were the last one I got off of. I mean, besides cigarettes.
Were you participating in a scene to this type of stuff? Like, were you going to shows and like your friends were doing, like crystal meth is a drug that I have no experience with. Like what,
Yeah.
I mean, not only personally, but just none of my friends have experimented with that. What sort of road does that lead you on? Like, what is it? It's not a depressant. It's a...
No, it's a stimulant.
Stimulant. I could not think of the word for it.
Yeah. I mean, with enough drugs, you can be up for a couple of weeks. In Portland, a lot of my friends were gay, and it's kind of like a party drug.
Okay.
At least in the 90s it was. I mean, it was less white trash than it is now, basically.
Right.
So
right.
It was big in the clubs, and because you could do a few lines and stay up all night and
Got it.
have a good time, and et cetera, et cetera. So I was kind of hanging out with a lot of people who were doing the drug then. I moved around a couple of times and it stuck. I ended up finding the drug, and it started getting trashier and scarier, and then I was just doing it to kind of feel good and maintain my lifestyle. I wasn't hanging out with people that were doing it. I wasn't having an awesome time anymore. It was just maintenance, and I didn't want that anymore. And I had a house fire that probably partially because I was messed up on crystal meth, and we left candles burning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is one of those bad things that you try not to think about, but then you also try and kind of learn from. You know what I mean?
Fortunately, because you obviously made it out the other side, to where you have a clear enough head that you can look back on this and been like, what do I derive from this experience that can obviously help inform who I am now? Yeah.
With the alcohol, I mean, I was going to a lot of punk shows, and we would always get wasted before or during or both.
Sure, all the above for that.
Yeah, with the prescription addiction, that came about because I have issues with anxiety. And so I was dating somebody who said, why don't you go to a psychiatrist and see what they can do for your anxiety? And I did. And what they wanted to do was put me on all these pills. So I did it, and I started abusing them. So I picked up another doctor, and, so I could have two doctors writing me prescriptions. And, then I picked up a third doctor at one point, and it was just a big mess,
Sure.
And somehow my insurance was paying for all these.
Dude. My gosh.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, because you figure out what the insurance is going to pay for, and they won't pay for two prescriptions of the same med, but they will pay for two prescriptions of similar meds. So you have, this doctor prescribing these three, and this doctor prescribing these other three that are similar.
You were being resourceful to something that was destructive.
Yeah, totally destructive. And during this time with this pill addiction and alcoholism, I got off the booze because I realized I was going to kill myself.
Sure.
And, I stayed on the pills because there's this idea that, prescription meds are medicine where, alcohol's, a drug and alcoholism's bad. And,
right.
But the medicine, it's prescribed to you by a doctor so it feels safer. I don't know why.
In moderation, both let's see, like my wife, my mother, a lot of people in my family battle with depression.
Right.
Not anxiety, but depression. So a lot of what they, they're all medicated, but obviously it's like they're taking one pill a day. It's definitely one of those things that obviously is not spiraled out of, oh no, I wouldn't even say spiraled out of control, but done the extent that, some people can easily abuse that type of stuff.
Right.
And
And the antidepressants aren't really abusable. It's
sure.
Yeah, it's the anti-anxieties, like, the Xanax and whatnot, that you can really
That's true.
have a problem with. And I also have attention deficit problems. And so, I was getting, Adderall and all that, which is basically like crystal meth. So, I was abusing all those too at the same time, and one day I realized, I had met my now wife, and, things were going really well. And then I saw that things were not going so well. And I realized what was going on is, that my addiction was going to destroy this relationship. And so I quit cold turkey.
Nice. You need those motivating factors to kind of snap you back into some sense of reality. Otherwise, it's hard to live in that world because you're not living in the world that is present in front of you. And so all during this time, were you just doing kind of like, tech work and, IT work and stuff like that? Or were you doing kind of, various jobs throughout that time?
Various jobs. I mean, I only did the tech work for a little while. Most recently, I was working at a nonprofit. I was involved in animal activism during the, battles with alcohol and drugs too. That almost got me in trouble a few times because you show up to a demo drunk and, you're pounding on Fendi's windows and, you're putting everybody in danger.
Yeah, that's something I never really considered.
Yeah. Well, most people are smart enough not to show up to demos drunk. So
yeah, that's true.
I had my clean canteen at a demo and I had poured all this banana liqueur in it and then topped it off with chocolate soy milk. And that's what I was drinking at demos.
Oh my! That's incredible.
That's how stupid I was.
Sure,
that's how much I just didn't give a fuck. And I got home so drunk and so fucked up that day that the person I was seeing at the time was like, you have a problem. You need to get this fixed. Yeah. And the next day I was thinking about it. I was like, I do need to get this fixed.
You use the words like, you didn't give a fuck. You didn't give a fuck about yourself, but clearly you gave a fuck about something beyond yourself.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting how those two, views can obviously pull you in different directions. Once Liberator obviously started to come into your life and that comic started to, kind of crystallize in your head, was it one of those things that was like, literally one day you woke up and you're just like, this needs to exist. And I want to try to put these pieces together to make this happen. Because obviously comic book publishing is not easy at all.
No, it's not. It's really hard. It came about like that. Back 10 years ago, that night that I was, Googling videos.
Yeah.
I found videos of, the Animal Liberation Underground, ALF actions. I was like, mixed in with, Meet Your Meat and the Huntington Life Sciences videos. I found these videos that were like a little more inspiring because instead of animals being tortured, it was animals being taken out of torturous places. And I saw these, people with the masks and the black clothes. And I was like, fuck, these guys are like superheroes for animals.
Uh-huh.
Immediately, I thought, wow, this would make a really cool comic book concept. And kind of it's always been in the back of my mind that, somebody should make this comic book. Why isn't this a comic book? And I'm reading about Batman and I'm reading Spider-Man and all this crap. And I'm like, fuck, why isn't there an animal liberation kind of comic book? And then, years later, kind of I had that click where I was like, well, why don't I just do it? Why don't I stop waiting for someone else to do it? Because they're probably going to do it wrong and fuck it up. Right. Why don't I just do it myself? So, yeah.
And by this time, you were, for all intent and purposes, you were just a fan of comics. You had no connections within the quote unquote industry or anything to put together from that perspective, right?
Right. No. At the time that I decided that I wanted to make a comic book, I didn't know anybody.
Yeah, which is incredible. Like, I just love that because obviously that goes to show, like, when people want to put something out there in the world, people can think of 10 reasons why they shouldn't, but then as long as they stick to the one reason why they should, that will hopefully guide you through those 10 reasons why you shouldn't, Like, I don't know anybody in the comic book industry. How the fuck am I going to pay for this? How's this going to exist?
Yeah. Those are all very important questions.
Yeah, very important questions. The Kickstarter was like a massive success. I mean, you were like 120% funded, weren't you?
Yeah, it was.
And so at that point, did people start to like become more interested from the industry perspective? Because obviously it was, successful, and that's like kind of how Black Mask came into the picture.
Yeah, definitely. After the Kickstarter showed that there was interest enough to, at least make one series of comics about this, there was definitely more interest from the comic book community. I mean, I had drummed up some interest along with other people helping me out, of course. We had drummed up some interest and some publicity within the comic book world before the Kickstarter's end, but afterwards, definitely there was more. And then after the first issue was published, there was a lot more because people saw that it wasn't just piece of shit preaching to the choir.
Yeah, here's this little pebble in an ocean. This isn't even going to mean anything.
Right.
A main crux of the profits from Liberator, you're obviously dedicating to the work that you do. I mean, is your day job focused on animal rescue?
I don't have a day job that pays money right now.
Sure.
My day job is making these comics, and which so far has cost me a lot of money, but hasn't made me anything. And then the animal rescue work and the fostering and stuff like that is, it's all volunteer stuff. That's what takes up all my time.
Like I was saying, a large portion of the proceeds that you have made from Liberator for all the sales, like obviously goes directly back into the work that you do with animal rescue.
Yeah, 100% of my profit share. Anything I get is going back to animals because I didn't think it was right to make a comic book about this subject without having at least my share of the money go back towards work with animals.
You literally put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, well, not literally.
Figuratively. There
yeah.
We go. Yeah.
I'm not putting money in my mouth. It's gross. It's dirty.
Yeah. I definitely misuse literally a lot of the time. I think most people do.
Yeah, I know.
When I saw the news that you joined up with Black Mask, it was obviously pretty interesting to me, coming from my the music background, and obviously from where you come from as well. That everybody that's involved with it has a background in playing in bands.
Yeah.
And that's obviously that in and of itself is really cool, that those two mediums of music and comic books can kind of come together in a collective experience. Were you just kind of like, whoa, is this really happening, when they first started to get in touch and it started to come together?
The way that I found them was through the Occupy Comics project that they were doing. Somebody on Twitter, an anonymous Twitter that I follow, pointed me to them, to the Occupy Comics thing, and was like, hey, have you heard of this? And I saw that it was being put together by this Black Mask Studios group, and I did a little research and saw